Welcome to Steady Steps Music, a channel where we learn music one small, easy step at a time. Today we're talking about chord changes, what they are, how you can practice them, and the specific strategies you can use to make them a little easier and a little smoother. We've learned a lot of chords so far. We want to make them as easy as possible to switch from one chord to the next. Now, when you're first learning guitar chords, you're spending all of your focus placing one finger at a time. You're working on what's called fine muscle coordination, the tiny, precise movements of your fingers that makes the contact to the strings just right. But then it's time to change the chords. And if you're not super familiar with the new chord, you'll have to use that same fine muscle coordination all over again to get each finger in the right place. And things can feel not so very coordinated at first. That's completely normal, and here's why. When you're placing your fingers one at a time, you're having to think a lot about where your fingers are going. So we want to use a concept called muscle memory. This is your biggest friend when it comes to learning the guitar. Through simple repetition, you can train your hand to know exactly where it needs to go for each chord without any thinking at all. Someday, someone will just say D major, and your fingers snap right there, without thinking about it at all. That's what we want to get to. The only way to get there is through simple repetition. Here's the good news. You can focus just on the repetition, and that alone will help you to move from chord to chord. Some chord changes are more challenging than others. For example, if you're going from G major to C major, you can see that every single finger has to move. There are no fingers in common. Now compare that to A minor to C. Only one finger has to move. 2 out of the 3 fingers stay exactly the same place. This is a big concept called anchor fingers or pivot fingers. The idea is that you move the fewest fingers possible to get to the next chord, and whichever fingers don't move or move just a little bit allow you to track and have a frame of reference where your other fingers are going. Makes it a little easier on your hand. Let's dive a little deeper into these chords. A minor to C. Find your A minor chord that we've learned. Now you know the next chord is C, so you're thinking where you're going. Before you move, what does C look like? Now, if you don't know the chord C very well, you're going to have to sit and think about this for a second. But if you're very comfortable with C, you'll know you'll just need to move this one finger, right? You may have previously thought, okay, I'm going to pick all my fingers up and put them all back down. But instead of doing that, let's just focus on moving one finger. We're going to move the ring finger to the 3rd fret of the A. That's all that moves. That one move changes the chord. Let's move from G to D. This is a more challenging chord change. You have G. There are no fingers in common with the chord D. That's okay. Here's the plan of what we're going to do. Your ring finger makes a really small move, as you can see, right? You can move from one string over to the next. All you're doing is moving from the high E string on the 3rd fret to the B string on the 3rd fret. That's the difference. In this case, that's going to be our pivot finger. What we did was we found a finger that's going to pivot from one chord to the next. It doesn't have to be in the exact same place. It can be close by. So move this finger first. Now move these fingers. And you have that chord change. Soon you'll be doing chord changes quickly. Which leads us to our next point. We can get these chord shapes into our muscle memory quicker if we focus on repetition, practicing just the chord shape itself. So let's go to the chord G. Put your fingers down on G, play it. Okay, now take your hand off the guitar. We just undid what we were doing. Put your hand back. Take your hand off. And go back. And away. Come back. What you're going to find is the first few times you do this, it's like a complete reset. But the more times you do this, your hand starts to know what G is. Your hand starts to know this shape and gets comfortable with it. Now let's do the same with D. Put your hand on D, take your hand off. Back to D, take it off. Return to D, take your hand away. D is getting more comfortable in your muscle memory. It's almost like your fingers know exactly where to go. Your fingers are starting to remember the chord. Anchor fingers are something that your brain does. Muscle memory is something that your hand does. They can work together. Move the one finger, and there's the chord. You can also practice individual chord changes because moving from one chord to a different chord might be very different. So for example, you have the chord change of G, going to C. This is a big change. Everything changes. And there's not really a good finger for pivot, or is there? The middle finger has to go over 2 strings and down 1 fret. You can see that. So you can see that. Over 2 strings and down 1 fret. So we'll use that. Set that as your first finger to move. And then build the chord around that pivot finger or anchor finger. Really, I like to use the word anchor finger if they're not moving at all, they're anchored. I use the word pivot finger if I'm using it to kind of pivot and they may not necessarily be anchored, but they kind of mean the same thing. Practice each of your individual chord changes on their own so you can get familiar with the specifics of that chord change. All right, now when you're playing one chord, your brain should start to think ahead about the next one. It's kind of like this. If you're trying to figure out, let's say you go out for a walk and you have 3 things you need to do when you're out on your walk. You need to pick up your mail, you need to go to the store, and you need to visit your friend. You're going to be thinking ahead so to make sure that you know the route to get to all those different places. Think similarly here with your chord changes. You want to think ahead. What's the next chord? What are the main fingers I want to think about? What finger works best for me to think about in order to hit that chord and play it correctly? This builds a mental habit of thinking ahead. So for example, G. What's my next chord? D. I got to think ring finger, pivot finger. G. My next chord, C. I got to think that middle finger, pivot finger. It'll get better over time. The more repetitions you do, the better it gets. One thing that I can say at this phase in the beginning part of learning to play guitar is go slow. Be deliberate. Focus on practicing correctly versus trying to do it fast and getting it messy. The slower you go, you're training the muscle memory to be correct. You can train incorrect muscle memory, and we want to avoid that as much as possible. So go nice and slow. Make sure each chord sounds good. Think about the tortoise, not the hare. It's better to go slow. Slow and steady wins the race. Over time, you won't have to worry about going slow, but in the beginning phase, it's helpful. Speed will come automatically once the muscle memory gets locked in. You don't have to chase it. Now, I want to talk quickly about frustration here. It's going to happen. It's a natural part of the process. I'm a professional gigging musician, and I still get frustrated sometimes, whether that's on stage or in practice. But part of the personal growth that comes through playing music is learning to manage your frustration. Here's what's good about this. It's just momentary, and you can move past frustration. On the other side of it is the feeling of fulfillment when something clicks. You realize, I succeeded in doing something that's really cool. You're doing something that really isn't as far away as it feels in those moments of frustration. Your fingers might get a little sore at first, but the longer you practice, the more you work at it, everything becomes easier as your hand gets better at playing the guitar and as your brain gets better at visualizing the strategies. If you want to practice the changes with a steady beat, use a metronome. I'll link one from the Steady Steps Music website that's completely free and easy to use. You can learn lots of songs, especially in the beginning phases of playing the guitar, with some of the chords you already know. This is a tool called a capo, and what it allows you to do is to clamp on the strings on any given fret and move the position of the 0 fret. You could think of it like a movable nut. It clamps across all the strings, so any fret can become your new 0 fret. This allows you to play songs with chords you already know in keys that maybe you don't know the chords for those quite yet. Lots of new songs get unlocked by just using a capo, so I recommend picking up a capo at your local music store. Now, when you put the capo on the guitar, you want to put it so that your hand can fit chords comfortably against it, but you also want to make sure that it's pressed a little more than halfway towards that fret bar. You see how mine is positioned here? There's a little space between the fret bar and the capo, but it's not in the far back side of the fret too. It's close to the fret bar so that you can play chords and the capo doesn't touch your hand too much. So now here's what's cool about this. Here's G, E minor, C, and D. Add the capo, same chords, G, E minor, C, and D. Now you have a whole new set of chords you can play. This is going to open up a whole new set of songs you can play as well. Now, this is not just a shortcut. Professional musicians use capos all the time, and there's something special about the sound of a capo on a guitar. It kind of just brightens everything up, and you can go as high as you want. Lots of cool things you can do with a capo. We'll dive deeper in a future episode and I'll show you some more of the ways you can use the capo for fun, but for now, just know that you can do a lot with it. All right, you earned your bonus chord for today, E major. This is an awesome chord because it takes advantage of lots of open strings on the guitar and you get to use the lowest note of the guitar as the root of the chord, which gets a nice deep sound. You already know E minor, which is just 2 fingers. The difference between E minor and E major is you just add finger 1 to the first fret of the G string. Now you can hear the difference clearly between a minor chord and a major chord, and you can see there's only 1 fret difference. That's worth remembering. E minor, darker, maybe a little sad. That's E major, a little brighter, a little happier. E major is one of the most important chords on the guitar because since the guitar has E as the lowest note, it just makes a lot of sense that a lot of guitar songs have an E chord in them. It's kind of the note the guitar is tuned to as the chord that you're playing. That's it for today. Another small, manageable step in your musical journey. If you find this content helpful, please give this video a like down below, share it if you feel someone you know would enjoy it, and subscribe to the Steady Steps Music channel for more lessons just like this. If you'd like to grow your skills faster in a private lesson with me, head on over to steadystepsmusic.com to book a free introductory lesson. See you in the next one.